last one left alive, freezing and starving to death on Isle Royale in Lake Superior. I just want Mom and Dad to know my fate. These were the final words of the SS Kamloops, found floating in a message in a bottle. It was located near the mouth of the Agony River by a trapper in December 1928, a year after the Kamloops vanished with all hands during a storm on Lake Superior. The message was written by Alice Bettridge, a young assistant stewardess on the Kamloops. Her final words paint a depressingly hopeless fate, and for nearly 50 years, her despairing message and a few frozen bodies and objects were the only traces of the 250-foot package freighter ever found. The Kamloops soon became one of the most infamous ghost ships of the Great Lakes. But then, half a century later, on August 21st, 1977, a wreck was discovered northwest of Isle Royale. Lying on its side, the wreck was remarkably well preserved by the frigid waters of Lake Superior. It was soon confirmed that it was indeed the ghostly Kamloops. Hoping to solve her mystery, divers combed over the wreck, searching for clues that could explain what ultimately doomed the small freighter and her crew. They found a world frozen in time. As they explored deeper into the wreck, they discovered shoes, clothing, food, and numerous other personal objects perfectly preserved as if they were plucked from the day they were lost. Then a diver went deeper, climbing into the bowels of the ship. Down a stairway, he found her engine room, again perfectly preserved. As he explored the ghostly space, he noticed something move out of the corner of his eye. He whirled around, and to his horror, he was confronted by a ghostly white figure, floating only a few feet away from him. It was the body of a crew member, mummified by the frigid lake water, entombed forever in the engine where he worked 50 years before. While horrifying at first, the body is a grim reminder that the Kamloops took 22 lives with her the night she succumbed to the fury of Lake Superior. What ultimately sealed their fate remains a mystery. The Kamloops was nothing to write home about. She wasn't one of the massive bulk freighters that came to dominate the Great Lakes in the early half of the 20th century. Instead, she was small and economical, designed to traverse the Canadian canals of the St. Lawrence River. Built in England at the Furness Shipbuilding Company in Durham, Yard Number 68 was launched on May 20th, 1924. Coming in at just 250 feet or 76 meters in length, with a beam of 43 feet or 13 meters, the 2,402-ton package freighter was designed to carry general cargo to smaller ports all over the Great Lakes. She was given 2 rigged masts to help load and unload cargo, and she was powered by a single triple expansion steam engine that could produce around 1,000 horsepower and achieve a speed of around 9.5 knots. She was operated by 22 crew members. Work began almost immediately. After completing her sea trials on July 5, 1924, the Kamloops, named after the city in British Columbia, was sent to Denmark to pick up a load of freight before traveling to her new home across the Atlantic in Montreal. Once she arrived in the Great Lakes, she began the grueling schedule typical of a lake freighter. She was used to carry all sorts of goods from Montreal up to the small but growing Canadian ports that dotted Thunder Bay, Ontario. Her holds carried everything from grain and other bulk goods to consumer products like clothing, food, and industrial parts. She would sail as late into the season as possible, usually weeks or even months after many of the larger freighters were laid up for the season. Demand was high, and for many small communities in the upper Great Lakes, these shipments would be the last supplies to arrive before the long and brutal winter months left them virtually cut off from the outside world. These late-season voyages were treacherous, but most importantly to our owners, they were profitable. Captains earned their reputations through numbers. More runs meant more profit. A captain willing to dare the late-season gales could edge up his ship's numbers. While it was ultimately the captain's decision whether or not his ship sailed, there was considerable pressure from management to take risks. Heavy weather captains were rewarded with bonuses and career security. Time and time again throughout her short career, the Kamloops was pushed to her limits. In 1924, she was the last vessel of the season to pass through the Sault Ste. Marie Canal. In 1926, she became icebound on the St. Mary's River trying to carry out a late-season run. She remained trapped in the ice for 9 days before she was finally dislodged on December 11. Her owners, the Canadian Steamship Lines, released a statement claiming that the incident would not deter them because something like that only happened once every 50 years. The company pushed the Kamloops back into service as soon as they could the following year, a season that would prove to be her last. Captain William Bryan spent his life on the lakes. Born in Kingston, Ontario, Bryan's father taught him how to sail at an early age. When he was 21, he took a job on a lake freighter. For the next 21 years, he rose through the ranks, working on the Kenora and the Seguin, before eventually taking command of the Kamloops. By 1927, the 45-year-old captain was known as a skilled navigator who ran a happy ship. The Kamloops was held to a grueling schedule and spent a great deal of time waiting for locks and sitting in ports as cargo was loaded and unloaded. The long periods of downtime gave Captain Bryan and his crew plenty of time to bond, and these close ties were further strengthened by the often difficult sailing conditions the ship encountered during her late and early season runs. Late season runs were always riddled with anxiety. Crews were tired and anxious to begin their winter leave. The weather was often brutal and unpredictable. As fall gave way to winter, a relatively pleasant day could dissolve into a nightmare in just a few hours. Captain Bryan was no doubt eager to bring the season to an end as his ship was loaded with cargo in Port Colborne, Ontario on December 1, 1927. She carried a diverse cargo that included coiled wire, salt, candy, shoes, building supplies, and parts for paper-making machinery. The weather forecast was ominously ambiguous, with a cold front predicted to sweep down over the lakes from northern Canada. Captain Bryan knew that meant rough weather was coming, but when and how rough was anyone's guess. The best he could do for his ship and the 21 crew members on board was to finish the run as quickly as possible. As soon as the Kamloops cleared the dock, he ordered full ahead, sailing as quickly as their modest engine could carry them up the lakes. To his relief, as they crossed Lake Erie and began up Lake Huron, the weather held up well. But by the time they reached Sault Ste. Marie, things took a turn while they waited to pass through the locks. The wind picked up dramatically and temperatures plummeted. Lake Superior was whipped into a frenzy. The opportunity to finish this last run in peace seemed to have passed. At the locks, Captain Bryan wrote an anxious letter to his wife, telling her that the weather was bad and he would need to anchor near Whitefish Point to wait out the storm. Late-season gales were brutal, but they often passed quickly. This would delay his return home, but it would hopefully save him and his crew from a punishing run up Lake Superior. After clearing the Sault, the Kamloops joined a small fleet of freighters that made the same decision to wait out the storm in the protected bay. For 2 days, wind, waves, and snow lashed at the sheltering ships, but for now, they were safe. After spending 2 days sheltering in Whitefish Bay, Captain Brian found himself in an increasingly impossible situation. The weather was not letting up. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. He realized that his prudence 2 days ago might have trapped him into an even more brutal run up Lake Superior. There was enormous pressure to finish the run. Every day that his ship sat anchored, they were bleeding money. If the weather got any worse, and it seemed to be deteriorating rapidly, he could risk not finishing the run at all, putting his career in serious jeopardy. As the storm grew worse, it seemed that it was now or never. So on December 5th, Captain Brian decided that the Kamloops would press on. Other captains made the same decision. Another ship, the 283-foot Quedagh, was bound for Port Arthur and joined the Kamloops on her dash up Lake Superior. Their departure unfortunately coincided with a second significantly more brutal cold front. Temperatures plummeted to as low as -38 degrees Fahrenheit. The snow was relentless, plunging those unlucky enough to be out on Lake Superior into a whiteout. Downbound ships limped into the Sioux completely covered in a thick layer of ice. This was the maelstrom Kamloops and Quedagh sailed into when they left the safety of Whitefish Bay. Neither ship had a radio, and visibility was so bad that they could barely see each other's lights through the blizzard. The Quedagh led the way, while the Kamloops followed not far behind. Captain Roy Simpson of the Quedagh was essentially sailing blind as they inched further north, praying for the lights of safety. By dusk on the night of December 6th, Simpson knew that they had to be close to the rocky shoreline of Isle Royale, but he couldn't be sure where. Suddenly, a lookout shouted, "Rocks dead ahead." Captain Simpson sprang into action and grabbed the wheel himself, turning hard to starboard. After an agonizing few moments, his ship responded, narrowly avoiding the deadly rocks. When he was sure that his ship had avoided immediate disaster, he looked back to search for the Kamloops. Through the chaos, he could just barely make out her lights through the storm. He knew he had to warn them, and he let out a series of blasts from his horn. Not long after he sent the warning, the Kamloops disappeared in the maelstrom. Captain Simpson was still hours away from safety. He had to turn his attention to keeping his ship on course, fighting to avoid falling into a deadly trough. Fortunately, the Quedagh made it through the night. Captain Simpson and his crew were probably the last people to ever see the lights of the Kamloops. As the storm clouds cleared and ships limped into port, no one thought much about the missing Kamloops. Many thought that the small package freighter either found a sheltered inlet to ride out the storm, or at worst ran aground on some remote shore. Even Captain Simpson of the Quedagh, who warned the Kamloops about the rocks off Isle Royale, didn't think much of the ship's delayed arrival. While he was pretty sure that they probably didn't hear his warning calls over the roar of the storm, he assumed that any competent lookout could see the danger in time, just as they had on his ship. But as the days passed, concern grew. Finally, on December 12th, a party was sent to search for the missing ship. The Midland Prince, the Islet Prince, and a small fleet of fishing vessels scoured the area around Isle Royale, but no trace of the Kamloops or her crew were found. Being so late in the season, the weather quickly deteriorated, and by December 22nd, the search was unfortunately called off. The Kamloops was declared a loss with all hands, and the mystery of her final moments seemed like they would go unsolved. Then came a gruesome discovery on Isle Royale. On May 26, 1928, after the winter ice thawed away, a fisherman named David Lind was retrieving nets when he came across two bodies clad in life preservers near 12 o'clock point on the northwest coast of Isle Royale. Their vests were clearly labeled with the stenciled word, Kamloops. The Coast Guard cutter Crawford was dispatched to collect the remains and search the area. The receding ice revealed numerous remnants of the ill-fated ship. Life rings, broken hatch covers, cargo, pieces of her shattered pilot house, half a lifeboat, oars, and even Captain Bryan's personal trunk were found littered around the beach. On June 4th, 6 more bodies were discovered, painting a horrifying picture of what happened that night. All but one, first mate Honoré Guenist, wore life jackets, and a lifeboat found nearby made it clear that these crew members had enough time to flee the Kamloops and make it to shore. The sub-zero temperatures, lashing wind, and unrelenting snow made survival all but impossible. While it's unlikely anyone survived more than a few hours, there were signs that someone tried to build a makeshift shelter. The horrors of the night were beginning to reveal themselves, but the mystery of the Kamloops' final moments remained unsolved. She became another ghost ship, lost to Lake Superior. It's one thing to imagine what the crew of the Kamloops went through in their final moments. It's another to hear it from them directly. Almost a full year after the tragedy, a trapper named Louis Coutu was hunting near the Agony River in Ontario, just north of Sault Ste. Marie, when he came across a bottle floating in the mouth of the river. It contained a chilling note, scrawled in neat but desperate handwriting. He initially proposed selling the letter, but after the proposal sparked outrage, he turned it over to the family of the letter's writer, Alice Bettridge, a 23-year-old assistant stewardess on the Kamloops. Initially, the letter was thought to be a hoax, but Alice's family confirmed that the neat handwriting was a match. The letter offered a tragic window into Alice's final moments. "I am the last one left alive, freezing and starving to death on Isle Royale in Lake Superior. I just want Mom and Dad to know my fate." For the next 50 years, that was it. Nothing more was found, and the mystery of the Kamloops faded into local legend. A ghost story told around the mess table on cold winter nights on Lake Superior. But as the years went on, interest in the mystery endured. By the late 1970s, new sonar and diving technology offered tantalizing hope the ghost ship could maybe be found. Enthusiasts knew the general area where the Kamloops met her fate. Roy Oberg, a local fisherman and helmsman of the Voyager ferry that serviced Isle Royale, began searching the area with side-scan sonar. Eventually, he came across a large object resting on the lake bed near 12 o'clock point. Oberg told a group of local divers about the find, and soon Ken Merriman, Randy Salter, and Ken Engelbrecht began diving the area, looking for traces of the mysterious object. On August 21st, 1977, they came across the telltale signs of a shipwreck. Bundles of pipes, a ladder, and a brass barrel were scattered across the lake bed. They ventured further, slowly and methodically, until finally they came upon what they were searching for: a large mass looming before them. It was a shipwreck. They were only able to get a quick look at the mysterious wreck before they had to head back to the surface. Nothing was certain. An unknown wreck can always surprise divers, but they were almost sure that this was the fabled Kamloops. They kept their find a secret until they could return the following summer. It was on this dive that they found what they were looking for: her stern nameplate still bearing the name Kamloops. It was an incredible find. The remarkably well-preserved wreck offered a tantalizing window into the past, Shoes, clothing, even boxes of Lifesavers candy, their wrappers still pristine, though the candy inside dissolved away long ago. But the wreck held a more somber reminder of the people that once lived and worked on the ill-fated package freighter. Inside were bodies, mummified by the icy waters of Lake Superior, still floating where they died. Janet Grafton, who went by Nettie, the Kamloops' first stewardess, began working on the lakes in 1908. She was known for her infectious smile and radiant, jolly energy. Everyone loved her. In a letter written only days before the tragedy, she told a friend that 1927 would be her last season on the lakes. Her body is among those entombed in the wreck. A man floats in the engine room, dubbed Old Whitey due to his ghostly white appearance. He has become ingrained in the Kamloops legend. Divers note that you can still see the wedding ring on his finger. The discovery of the Kamloops offered some clues to what happened the night she sank. Her rudder and screws are in good condition, and her engine room telegraph was set at the finish with engines position, suggesting that her engines were shut off before she went down. Some believe that her smokestack broke away during the storm, rendering her boilers inoperable. Left powerless, she eventually succumbed to the raging wind and waves. Others believe she struck rocks and drifted for some time before finally sinking. There was, after all, enough time for a lifeboat to get free from the doomed freighter. It's also possible that she capsized after becoming hopelessly covered in ice. Ultimately, we'll never know what exactly brought down the freighter. Alice's body was among those found in Isle Royale in 1928. She was identified by her teeth. Nettie was the only other woman on board, and her teeth were false. In her note, she says, "Tell them it was just me who is not dead." She wrote in the past tense. A chilling acknowledgement that the end was near. It's a feeling none of us know. The imminent certainty that you are about to die. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.